could take their seats, please. I would like to ask Commissioner Dilawar Syed to come up to introduce Congressman Honda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, and welcome back, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed the summit so far today. We now go into an afternoon session, and we will have the session kicked off by Congressman Mike Honda's remarks. I'm sure he doesn't need much of an introduction in this community, but I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about him. I cannot think of a more passionate, a more consistent, and a more driven advocate for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community than Congressman Mike Honda. All my interactions with him that I've had over the last few years, I have always felt that he's a mentor, not to me, but to all of us, and especially those of us who are looking to engage actively in public service. And I'm sure those of you who have met him will agree with that. He chairs the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus in the U.S. Congress. He's been a chair for 7 years. And through that capacity, he has led some of the most impactful efforts for our community. In particular, this initiative itself, the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, has been championed by Congressman Honda. The reestablishment of the commission that I'm a member of, and what we're doing here today, all those efforts have been championed by Congressman Honda steadfastly over the last many years. So I think if you're benefiting from what you're hearing today, we owe in big part to his leadership. In addition to his, obviously, the support for the initiative, he's done a lot of work around R&D, support for our industries in the Valley, for the green industry, for nanotechnology, and for others. And finally, I wanted to end with a couple of points about his earlier career, and it hit home again as a parent of young children myself. He spent about 30 years in his early life as a teacher, as a school principal, and as a member of a school board. Really, to me, that's the highest form of public service that teachers give. And that grounding that he's had in the community, obviously he's serving us well now that he serves with such wonderful leadership. So we are privileged to have him as a member of our community, as a leader in our community, and as our mentor as this initiative. So please join me in welcoming Congressman Mike Honda.
Well, good afternoon. Let's hear the other room. Good afternoon. Okay, that's good. It's a myth they say Asians are quiet. We're not quiet. Are we? We speak up when we have to. Well, welcome everybody and Happy New Year. It's the Year of the Rabbit, right? Year of the Rabbit? I was born in the year of the snake. Why is that funny? This is supposed to be a good sign. And it's really an honor for me to be here with the White House Initiative Summit on the Entrepreneurship and Small Business Growth. And I want you all to take real seriousness of the title. And I want to thank Dilawar for hosting this and taking the initiative to make the very first summit so successful. There's over 700 folks that's here, and there's more that had to be turned away. So I guess that means that we need to do more of this and have more of this exchange. I want to thank Secretary Gary Locke for his efforts and for co-chairing this. He said that it's co-chaired between himself and Secretary Duncan of the Secretary of Education. And I can't think of two great advocates for our communities than these two. And then Kinan Ahuja. If you're a Mexican, you pronounce Ahua. And in Mexican, that means right on, So you'll remember her name. And she has, let me tell you, this administration has hired so many executive directors who are attorneys, and she's a civil rights attorney. And she started out with 2 staffers according to, the way it was supposed to have been. But that wasn't enough for her, so she went out and got a total of 10 staffers now to help us do this immense work of addressing the needs of the Asian Pacific American community. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank Microsoft for opening up the place. And I guess they need to have a larger room. Either that or we got to get nano-sized. Well, that was the first attempt at a tech joke. I was going to start out saying nano, but Robin Williams will probably take offense to that. The Silicon Valley is really a symbol of economic prosperity, and we know that for a fact. But it would not be the way it is today were it not for folks like yourselves. We know that for a fact also. And we need to believe that to a point where we don't become arrogant, but we become confident that without us, the economic prosperity of this country could not happen as quickly and as efficiently as it has been in the past few decades. They talk about the IC board, the integrated, what's the C stand for again? Integrated Circuit Board, huh? Now, I want to see an Indo-Chinese Asian board and all these corporations here that represent us in making those kinds of decisions on the corporate world. We have a lot of people who are entrepreneurs who help make the wealth of this country, of Silicon Valley, of these companies. And there's a lot of inventions and innovations that are embedded in things that we take for granted. If you were to take a BlackBerry and pull out all the stuff and say, how many Asians were involved in development of this? Right? Almost all of you would be involved in it somehow. And so, but this is what we don't talk about. We don't talk about it. We say BlackBerry. I call it the Brockberry now, because he still has us, right? But we have to remember that all of us have contributed to the convergence of all the technology into something like this. But we have to be more outspoken and knowledgeable about who we are and what we've done for this area. So I tell you that the nationwide symbol of innovation and economic prosperity is a reflection of all of you. And I tell people that Silicon Valley is not a geographic area. Silicon Valley is a state of mind. Think about it. It is a state of mind. When people try to describe us, it's hard to describe us. We say risk takers, entrepreneurial, willing to work long hours and find different ways to have equity among the workers. This technology area, the corporate world here, you hardly find the president's office somewhere off in some corner, right? It's always among y'all. And so the corporate mentality is much different here than the traditional corporate mentality. One of the things I want to just leave with you as a policymaker is that we need to teach the policymakers of state, local, and federal that when we start to face challenges and problems looking for solutions, we have to get them to break out of the paradigm of the old traditional top-down way of doing things, or that you have somebody who's investing in it, that the angel groups and the further venture capitalists, that's a different way of doing business than the regular traditional historical way of corporate world. And given that, when we have problems in Congress, that you make sure that we look for solutions that fit the problem. And what I mean by that is when Enron started, it was corporate individuals that was bad, not the corporation itself. But what happened was the solution was to stifle corporations and tie the hands of those who are entrepreneurs and make us less efficient and less agile. So we need your help to make sure that the state of mind is transferred and change the paradigm in our thinking when we do problem solving as policymakers. So let me just talk a little bit about immigration. We've heard about immigration. By the way, how many of you, by the raise of hand, are first generation? Raise your hands. Cool. Okay. Put them down. How many of you speak another language other than English? How many of you created more jobs than 10? More than 100? You see? And this is what we're talking about. When we can come up with good policies, like immigration policies and things like that, that deal with students, entrepreneurs, other legislators, and scholars, that when we become less efficient in doing that, and it was spoken earlier about tourism, when we don't allow tourism to flourish here in this country, where people want to see this country and learn about us, we diminish ourselves. So we have to really get on the stick and make sure that we become agile in protecting our country, but at the same time, efficient, so that we can bring people through here so they can learn more about us. I just want to recognize that, and I want people to start saying more of these terminologies, like the richness of the diaspora we have in our country is a human resource we have not tapped into. The Asian Pacific American Initiative, the White House Initiative, recognizes that, and hopefully you know who all the members are. You look at their backgrounds and find out who they are, and go to Daphne and to Ms. Ahuja, and make sure that you utilize them so that they can start to respond to do things on your behalf. One of the reasons why I'm here for the summit is I want to hear from you telling us, myself as a policymaker, but also SBA and the other agencies, what's not working, in spite of the fact that we're trying hard in D.C. to make it happen. There's glitches along the way, and I know that there's glitches, but you need to share those glitches so that we can go back and refine what it is that we're trying to do. And if we don't do that, if we don't hear from you, then there's a sense of disappointment in the efforts we do in D.C. that it doesn't fully accomplish what we want to accomplish. Does that make sense? Okay. So do I hear an amen? That's all right. So we, and there's ways to do that. We can communicate in real time now. You got emails and things like that, and they have a very responsive group. And I'm very proud of them. I'm also proud of CAPAC, the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, within which we have over 40 members in Congress. We couple up with the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and the Progressive Caucus. We number over 90 members. When we vote together, we make things happen. The healthcare thing happened because we stuck together. We looked at gaps in our healthcare. We looked at gaps in the other kinds of delivery services. We're looking at language where we say to people, disaggregate the Asian American data so that we can be more precise and more targeted in the resources that we have. Disaggregate it. Because there are many members of other communities who should be here that are not here. And that we're focusing on small business that are the mom and pops, and small business like the cleaners and the stores, and people who are struggling on a daily basis, dipping into their personal resources so that they can hang on to the workers that they have, so that they don't have to lay them on. I'm going to go past time for a couple minutes. And I made a comment about our technology in our BlackBerry. So one of the points I wanted to make in that was this, that we've heard of the Pentium chip, right? But do we know who invented it? Was it Intel? Or was it Dr. Vinod? And so, these are the kinds of questions I want people to start asking themselves when they have these gadgets, Historically, we've heard about a third of our Silicon Valley startups are headed up by Asian Americans. And that's a much greater fraction than the population that we represent as the U.S. as a whole. YouTube, which revolutionized the way we access video online, was founded by AAPI, Stephen Chen. Mr. Dilawar Syed, he was and we all know this because it was said, that he's also a House Commissioner, a White House Commissioner, but he was head of business strategy and operations at Yahoo. He made Yahoo. He made Jerry Yang rich. That's what he did. He was head of the multi-billion-dollar corporation and the strategy that was involved in it. So there are those of us who have a lot of contributions that have been made but are not really acknowledged properly. So it's I just want to make sure that we do a shout out to all these folks. Locally, the AAPI small business owners, I always like to bring up, have you heard of Lee's Sandwiches? Yeah. It started out by a gentleman who immigrated here. He just passed away about a month ago. But his family's carrying on, and they have turned that sandwich entrepreneurial thing into a multi-million-dollar business. King Egg Roll, you've heard of that? And there's lots of others that are entrepreneurs. So my question is this. We're talking about resources and banks and making loans and getting loans from SBA. There are models among our own communities that we use to help each other start businesses, aren't there? People pool their monies together, and then somebody needs money. They pull out the money out of that pool and start their business and put it back in again. Why is there not some form or fashion of that kind of financing model that would be available to more people without having to going through financial institutions who make a profit off the interest that they get on the principal that they let out? I know that there are a lot of countries in this world that follow that model. So, I think it's incumbent upon us to look at that and ask ourselves, why not? So that more people can be involved in it. I want to also do a shout out to a lot of the communities who turn around depressed neighborhoods and neighborhoods that have gone down economically, that they go in there and turn it around. But I also want to say to us policymakers that we should be careful not to impose further expenses on them when they start to make a place more vibrant. Then we start saying through our local government, you got to bring things to code. Well, if they're creating an economic activity and they're putting tax dollars locally, why don't we figure out how to help them bring it to code? And we call that incentivizing, right? So rather than taking advantage of their entrepreneurial efforts, we should invest in them also so that we get a further return on our investments. And so I think that the state of how we look at small businesses still needs to be refined and be more thorough and thoughtful. And I think that requires us to work with these communities and these families and ask them, what is it that makes you successful, and how do we replicate that for the rest of the community? Minority businesses make a substantial contribution to our economy, and they potentially generate about $2.5 trillion in gross receipts and about 16 million jobs. That's not small change. And so what we want to be able to do is continue that entrepreneurship and make sure that our policymakers understand that and that they also appreciate it. So make sure that you make full use of the commission and the members of the commission, because we become your advocates. And the reason why this initiative is so important is that the size of our population sometimes is not great enough to get the political attention, but through this initiative it does. And we want this country and our policymakers to look at our communities not as a source of cash only. We're not ATM machines, right? But sometimes they look at us as ATM machines, right? And they ask for contributions, to give us a kiss on and a photo and send us back. That's over with. We know that we have political leverage in our innovations, in our entrepreneurship, to require people to start thinking about how to really tap into our genius. And our genius is in the communities that we have here. We have the diaspora that has the language, the know-how, and we still keep in touch with the old country, and we know how to make things happen. So we should start looking at, in the Department of Commerce, you have a perfect guy, Gary Locke, and then you have Stephen Chu in energy. What did they do the first time they got into office? They went to China, right? And what did they do when they came back? They came back with a memo of understanding with the PRC so that they can work together on innovations together so they don't have to fight over the intellectual property. We become partners. So this is the genius of this administration and the people that work there, but that genius is also here with you. And so let's take pride in that and make sure that we continue to take advantage of it. Remember, use Ms. Ahuja, and you'll have a new chair of KPAC. I've been a chair for 7 years. It's time to turn it over to someone else. I think it's okay to say that we're asking Congresswoman Judy Chu to take over the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. And I also want to say that in a couple of weeks, we're going to have somebody from Washington, D.C., a friend of mine, Clyde Williams, who is a political director of the DNC, but also someone who wants to be able to help enhance the kind of work that we do. And the kind of work that we do is nonpartisan, okay? Green is nonpartisan. The quality of life is nonpartisan. And the kinds of immigration reform we want to see is nonpartisan. And so we want to make sure that your communities, your children, and our future are the beneficiaries of everything that we do. Let me just close with this idea about taking part in government. I just want to let you know that the things that you think about on a daily basis are the very bedrock issues of public policy. And the reason why it's so important to have diversity in Congress is this. And Obama understands this, and I think the Secretary of Commerce understands this, that when we take our own personal life experiences, the barriers that we run across, the successes that we achieve, and the kinds of things that we see happen in our communities that's positive, and those things that are barriers, we should take those things and convert them into public policy so that the public policy addresses us in a more finite, refined, focused way, so that public policy becomes addressing us, okay? So that we can perfect the policy-making process so that we can make this country, as it says in the preamble of our Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union. So to all of you again, I want to thank you for your presence. I want to hear from you, so does the commission, but also I think you're going to have an evaluation process here. Please give us your precise and candid responses so that we can do a better job. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Honda.